It's a beautiful spring morning in May of 1536. The birds are chirping, bees are buzzing lazily through the air, and the flowers outside the Tower of London are in full bloom. But inside that same tower, a woman sits alone in her chamber, waiting to die. She wears a dark gown and a simple white fur cape. The jewels that once surrounded her are gone. Just a few years earlier, she'd been crowned the Queen of England, one of the most powerful kingdoms in all of Europe. And now, she sat awaiting her executioner. Her name was Anne Boleyn. And for centuries, historians have asked the same question. How did we get here? How did the woman that once held the King of England completely in her power lose everything in just 3 short years? The answer reveals something truly fascinating about power and what happens when a queen archetype tries to step fully into her own in a world that'll never truly allow it. Anne Boleyn is often remembered as a seductress, a conniving, power-hungry mistress that plotted her way to the top only to watch it come crashing down. History hasn't been particularly kind to her. From rumors that she had 11 fingers to accusations of a betrayal so heinous that it was used to justify her execution, Anne has long been painted as dangerous. But here's the thing. Most of what we know about Anne was written by the people who benefited from her downfall. People loyal to Henry. People who were invested in destroying her reputation. Because Henry didn't just want to be rid of Anne. He wanted the world to be rid of her too. So the question isn't any longer, what did Anne do? It's what went so horribly wrong? How does a woman rise that high only to fall that hard? When we really look at the history, we can trace it all back to one key mistake. Something Anne fundamentally misunderstood about power. And that's what we're going to be unpacking today. Hey guys, it's Got That, and welcome to my channel. This is my corner of the internet where we like to sit down and talk about the psychological patterns, historical case studies, and archetypes that shape how women move through the world, and how we can use those insights to look at ourselves differently and create a life we truly love. If that sounds like something that you're interested in exploring further, I encourage you to subscribe and hang out for a bit. Love to have you. In the early 16th century, Anne Boleyn was born into a well-respected but not particularly powerful noble family in England. Her father was a diplomat, a man who understood how to navigate the world of power, languages, and culture, and Anne would inherit those same skills. She spent much of her youth abroad, particularly in France, where she received a sophisticated education and developed a sharp sense of social awareness. Anne was never known for being the most beautiful woman in court, but she had something else. She was intelligent, charming, witty, magnetic. There was something about her presence that people just couldn't ignore. And Anne understood something very important very early on: the power of attention. Because in Tudor England, it wasn't just about status. It was about proximity. Who noticed you? Who favored you? Who chose you? And Anne knew exactly how to play the game. Because when she returned to England from France, she didn't just blend into the court. She stood out. And eventually, she caught the attention of the most powerful man in the country, King Henry VIII himself. Now, most women in her position would have followed a familiar path. They would have become his mistress. That was the game. But Anne made a different move. How do you capture the affection of a king who has it all? You create desire. And that's exactly what Anne did. Every time Henry leaned in, she would pull back. Every time Henry would pursue, she would withhold. And what started out as interest quickly transformed into an obsession. Henry didn't just want Anne, he needed her. He was ready to risk it all. His marriage, his reputation, his relationship with the Catholic Church, to make her his queen. And eventually, that's exactly what he did. After 7 years of pursuit, Anne Boleyn was finally crowned the Queen of England. She'd won. At least it appeared that way. But there was a major problem bubbling beneath the surface of her happily ever after. Because what Anne had built her entire relationship around was desire. And desire is not a stable foundation. At first, everything was aligned. Anne was magnetic, Henry was captivated. The chase fueled their relationship. But once that chase was over, everything began to change. Anne would give Henry a daughter, Elizabeth, who would go on to become one of England's greatest monarchs. But she did not give him a son. And in Henry's world, that changed everything. At the same time, Anne was stepping more fully into her role as queen. She spoke her mind. She challenged her husband. She became more assertive, more sovereign. And that was a problem. Because Henry hadn't fallen in love with a queen. He'd fallen in love with a lover. And those are two very different energies. The very same qualities that made Anne so irresistible in the beginning, her wit, her fire, her boldness, were threatening and inappropriate once she gained real authority. And slowly but surely, Henry's desire started to fade. In 1535, Henry shifted his romantic attention to one of Anne's ladies-in-waiting, Jane Seymour. And once that shift happened, Anne's power was no longer secure. Because here's the thing, Anne Boleyn had influence, but she never had any true power of her own. In my last video, I talked about Cleopatra and how she embodied the queen and lover archetypes to rule Egypt. Anne Boleyn embodied a lot of those same archetypes, but in a very different way. Because Cleopatra had power in her own right. Anne did not. Anne's influence came from her connection to Henry. It was relational, not absolute, not sovereign. And that's where everything began to unravel. Because Anne made one critical assumption, one fatal mistake that would end up costing her everything. She believed that once she became queen, she would finally have real, meaningful power. But the system that she was operating in was never designed to give her that. It wasn't built to support her and her interests. It was built around Henry. And Henry hadn't fallen in love with a queen. He'd fallen in love with a lover. And the moment she stopped being that, everything began to fall apart. Anne's power wasn't her own. It was borrowed from the man that she devoted all of her lover energy to. So when his desire disappeared, so did her position. When Anne was in Henry's favor, her queen and lover energies complemented each other beautifully. She was magnetic and strategic, charming but intelligent, fun-loving but composed. But once the lover foundation cracked, the queen had nothing left to stand on. Because the queen archetype needs sovereignty to thrive. And Anne was never given that. Anne built her power like a house of cards. Each move was strategic, each decision carefully placed. But the entire structure rested on one unstable foundation, someone else's desire. And the moment that shifted, everything collapsed. Now, most of us aren't navigating royal courts, but those same patterns of behavior we've been talking about today, still very familiar. Building up your identity around someone else's approval. Feeling powerful and worthy, as long as you're wanted. But the moment that validation disappears, so does your sense of self. Anne's story reminds us of something important. Influence is not the same as power. And power that depends on somebody else is never really secure. Anne Boleyn isn't simply a cautionary tale. She's a woman who saw what was possible and was bold enough to go for it, but was never given the true power she needed to hold on to it. And maybe that's why her story still lingers. Not because she failed, but because she got closer than most of us ever could have. But proximity to power is not the same thing as power. And that's the lesson that Anne learned too late. If you're still here, thank you so much. Truly, I love getting to explore these stories with you. If you enjoyed this video, I would love for you to leave a crown or a fire emoji in honor of our lover queen, Anne. In my next video, we're going to continue this conversation by talking about another queen who was never able to fully embody her power, Marie Antoinette. If you want to check out what this archetype duo looks like when it does work out, you can check out my Cleopatra video now. So I'll see you over there, or I'll just catch you next time. Until then, take care of yourselves. Bye, guys.